Under the soft rain of dawn, she accepts another ride without imagining what awaits her. The man who gets into the car doesn't seem to be just another client. There's something in his eyes that unsettles her. The ride turns into an exchange of hidden truths and unexpected revelations. At the end of the journey, it's not only the destination that surprises, but everything left between the unspoken words. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you are watching from. Let's begin. The fine July rain fell incessantly over the bustling streets of London, making the asphalt gleam under the lamplights. That day seemed endless for Louisa Rivers, who drove her white car with app stickers on the doors, watching pedestrians hurry to take shelter. At 32, divorced and mother to Peter, a 5-year-old boy passionate about dinosaurs, she had taken on the role of sole provider for the household since her ex-husband, Mark decided that fatherhood didn't align with his life aspirations. The ride-sharing app glowed on the phone screen attached to the dashboard. It was almost 11 p.m., and Louisa was already exhausted after 10 hours circulating through the city. Bills accumulated: rent for the small apartment in Islington, Peter's school, health insurance, and expenses always seemed to grow more than her ability to generate income. She took a deep breath, running a hand through her wavy brown hair, and accepted the ride. Just one more, she promised herself, as she did almost every night. The pickup location was the Savoy Hotel, one of London's most traditional and luxurious establishments on the Thames Embankment. Louisa knew the place well, not because she had ever stayed there, but because she frequently picked up passengers leaving sophisticated events held at the hotel. Parking at the imposing entrance, she saw the typical commotion: women in designer dresses, men in immaculate suits, hurried valets receiving imported cars. In that universe parallel to hers, a tip was equivalent to what she earned in several hours of work. The app showed the passenger's name, Raphael Alistair. Louisa sent a standard message informing him of her arrival and waited, watching the rain intensify. After a few minutes, a man appeared at the hotel entrance. He stood out from the other guests. Despite his well-tailored suit, his posture was different. There was none of the common arrogance among the regulars of that space. He walked with his shoulders slightly slumped, his tie loose, his gaze downcast. He checked his phone, looked around, and walked to Louisa's car. "Good evening." "Are you Louisa?" he asked, opening the door. "Yes, good evening. Raphael, right?" He nodded and got into the car. The destination indicated a condominium in Canary Wharf, an upscale area of the city. Louisa started the ride, and as she always did, tried to make light conversation. "Tough night with this rain, isn't it?" Raphael merely mumbled an agreement, looking out the window. His brown eyes seemed distant, lost among the drops running down the glass. Louisa understood the message. She was already used to passengers who preferred silence, and turned on the radio softly, a station playing classic pop. As she drove through London's wet streets, Louisa noticed in the rearview mirror that her passenger didn't seem drunk, just profoundly tired. A kind of tiredness she recognized, not physical but of the soul. The same she felt when, after a full day of work, she still needed to smile for Peter and invent stories about a bright future that she didn't always believe was possible. Passing by the Hyde Park Serpentine, now almost deserted due to the late hour, Raphael finally broke the silence. "Sorry for not being good company." "Complicated day." Louisa smiled in the rearview mirror. "No problem. We all have days like that." "It's amazing how people only show up when they need something, isn't it?" he commented, more to himself than to her. "An entire event full of people, and I've never felt so alone." Those words touched Louisa in an unexpected way. She, who usually maintained a professional distance from passengers, felt compelled to respond with sincerity. "I understand that well. Sometimes we're surrounded by people, and yet it's as if no one really sees us." Raphael looked up, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. Something silent settled in that brief contact, a mutual recognition of shared loneliness between two strangers in completely different worlds. "Do you always work late?" he asked, now genuinely interested. "Most days. I have a 5-year-old son, Peter. He stays with my mum when I work at night. During the day I work part-time as a waitress at a cafe in the City of London. That must be hard. It's the life I chose. Or that chose me, I'm not sure." She smiled, turning the wheel to enter the avenue leading to Canary Wharf. "And you? What do you do?" Besides attending boring events at the Savoy Hotel? Raphael let out a light laugh, the first since he got in the car. I'm the CEO of a tech company. Nexus Tech, do you know it? Louisa shook her head negatively. I'm not very connected to that tech world. My knowledge of technology is limited to using apps and helping my son with educational games on his tablet. Sometimes I wish mine was limited to that too, Raphael confessed. The company grew more than I imagined, and with that came responsibilities, expectations, and people who pretend to care about you when, in reality, they just want something. The conversation flowed naturally for the rest of the journey. Raphael talked about the pressure of leading a growing company, the difficult decisions, the sleepless nights. Louisa shared stories about Peter, about how she balanced 2 jobs and still found energy to play dinosaur hunter when she got home. As they approached the luxury condominium where Raphael lived, Louisa noticed he had fallen asleep in the back seat. His breathing was deep and his face, previously tense, now seemed more serene. She parked at the condominium entrance and hesitated, unsure how to wake him. The doorman approached, immediately recognizing the passenger. "Mr. Alistair arrived asleep again?" he asked with a sympathetic smile. "It seems so," Louisa replied. "He had a difficult day from what we talked about." "I'll call security to help him upstairs," said the doorman, picking up the internal phone. While they waited, Louisa noticed that the night had grown colder. Raphael shivered slightly in his sleep. In an automatic gesture, she took off her denim jacket, the same one she wore on cold days when the car heater failed, and placed it over him. Security arrived quickly, and together they gently woke Raphael. He opened his eyes confused, looking around and trying to orient himself. "We've arrived at your condominium," Louisa explained gently. "Security will help you upstairs." Raphael nodded, still sleepy, and got out of the car with the security guard's help. Louisa's jacket fell to the ground and the guard picked it up. "Your jacket, madam," he said, extending it. "You can leave it with him," Louisa replied, surprising herself. "It's cold tonight." The security guard shrugged and placed the jacket over Raphael's shoulders, who seemed not to fully understand what was happening. Before leaving, Louisa quickly wrote a note and handed it to the doorman. "Can you give this to him tomorrow?" The doorman agreed and she left, leaving behind a man who, despite all his wealth, seemed as lost as herself. The next morning, Raphael woke up in his duplex penthouse in Canary Wharf with a strong headache. The events of the previous night were hazy in his memory. He remembered the company event, the smiling investors, the false compliments, the impulsive decision to leave early. Sitting up in bed, he noticed a denim jacket on the armchair in the room. It wasn't his. Next to it, a handwritten note. "I got you home safely. No need to pay extra, rest well. Louisa." Raphael picked up the jacket, feeling the well-worn fabric. There was something profoundly authentic about that piece, so different from the designer clothes that filled his closet. He closed his eyes, and fragments of the conversation with the driver came back to his mind. Her calm voice, the story about her son who loved dinosaurs, the unpretentious honesty with which she spoke of her own life. How long had it been since he had a real conversation with someone? Without hidden agendas, without flattery, just 2 people sharing genuine parts of themselves. He picked up his phone and opened the ride-sharing app, looking for the record of the previous trip. He found Louisa's profile and stared at the small photo, a woman with wavy hair and a restrained smile. He hesitated with his finger over the option to send a message, but gave up. What would he say? "Thanks for covering me with your jacket, when I, a complete stranger, fell asleep in your car." At that very moment, miles away in the small apartment in Islington, Louisa woke up to Peter jumping on her bed, holding a toy Tyrannosaurus. "Mummy, wake up. Rex is hungry," she smiled, hugging her son and pulling him close. "Good morning, my scientist. What does Mr. Rex want for breakfast today?" "Pancakes with chocolate syrup," Peter replied, making the dinosaur roar. I think dinosaurs eat fruits and leaves, you know," she teased, getting out of bed. While preparing breakfast, Louisa thought about the passenger from the previous night. There was something in his gaze that had stayed in her memory, a loneliness that seemed to mirror her own, even though they lived in such distant worlds. "What nonsense," she murmured to herself, flipping the pancake in the pan. "I'll never see him again anyway." After dropping Peter off at school, Louisa headed to her day job at the Haven Cafe in the City of London. A simple but charming place, frequented mainly by executives and employees from nearby offices. The day went normally between serving coffees, taking orders, and cleaning tables. At lunchtime, when the movement increased, Louisa barely had time to breathe. It was then that she heard a familiar voice. "An espresso, please." Turning around, she found Raphael Alistair sitting at a corner table, wearing a blue dress shirt without a tie, dark, well-combed hair framing a face that, in daylight, revealed itself to be even more attractive than she remembered. And over his shoulders, completely contrasting with the rest of his appearance, was her old denim jacket. Louisa froze for an instant, her pen suspended over the order pad. He had found her. "How? Why?" "You left your jacket with me yesterday," Raphael said, as if reading her thoughts. "I thought I should return it personally." Louisa regained her professional composure. "You didn't need to bother. How did you find me?" "The condominium doorman mentioned you commented about working at a cafe in the city. It wasn't hard to find out which one. Your name isn't that common," he replied with a shy smile. "I hope I'm not being inconvenient." There was something vulnerable in the way he said that, as if he genuinely cared about the answer. Louisa shook her head. "No, it's fine. I'll get your coffee." While preparing the espresso, Louisa felt Raphael's gaze on her. It wasn't an invasive or uncomfortable gaze, just attentive, as if she were a puzzle he was trying to understand. When she returned with the coffee, he had already taken off the jacket and folded it carefully on the table. "Thank you for your kindness yesterday," he said, as she placed the cup in front of him. "I don't usually fall asleep in rideshare cars." "No problem." "You looked exhausted." "I was," he took a sip of coffee, "and confused about many things." "Still am, actually." Louisa should have gone back to serving other tables, but something kept her there. Confused about what? Raphael looked out the cafe window, at the frantic movement of the street. "About how I built a life that seems to impress everyone but myself." Before Louisa could answer, the cafe manager passed by, giving her a disapproving look. She quickly apologized and returned to work, serving other tables, but always aware of Raphael's presence. He stayed in the cafe for almost an hour, working on his laptop, occasionally looking up when she passed. When he finally asked for the bill, he left an absurdly large tip and a business card with his personal cell phone number written on the back. "If you ever need anything," he said as he left. "Or if you just want to talk again." Louisa put the card in her apron pocket without promising anything. It didn't make sense. People like Raphael Alistair didn't seek friendship with waitresses who drove for apps at night. There was always some hidden intention, some unstated interest. Life had taught her that many times. At the end of her shift, she picked up the card to throw it in the trash, but something stopped her. She put it in her purse, telling herself it was just a precaution, in case she ever really needed help. The following week, Louisa received a strange notification from the ride-sharing app. Someone had specifically requested her as the driver for a ride. The pickup address was the Nexus Tech headquarters in South London. She hesitated before accepting. She knew exactly who had made the request. "I'm getting myself into trouble," she murmured as she drove there. Nothing good can come of this, but a small voice inside her disagreed. There was something about Raphael Alistair that didn't fit the stereotype of the rich, bored businessman. The way he spoke about feeling lonely amidst so many people, the respect with which he treated her, the genuine vulnerability in his eyes. Perhaps, just perhaps, he too was looking for something real in a world of appearances. When she arrived at the mirrored glass commercial building where Nexus Tech headquarters was located, Raphael was already waiting for her on the pavement. He got into the car with a discreet smile. "Hi, Louisa. Thanks for accepting the ride." "It's my job," she replied, maintaining professional distance. "Where are we going?" Raphael gave an address in South London, near the Kew Gardens area. On the way, he tried to establish casual conversation, asking about Peter, about her work at the cafe. Louisa responded politely, but with reservation. "May I ask why you looked for me?" she finally asked, when they were already close to their destination. Raphael was silent for a moment. "Honestly, because you were the first person in a long time who treated me like a normal human being, not like the CEO of Nexus." He paused, and because that conversation we had, even short, was more genuine than most of the interactions I have in my daily life. Louisa parked in front of a discreet but elegant restaurant. Raphael made no mention of getting out of the car. "Actually, I don't have any appointments here," he confessed. "I just wanted an excuse to talk to you again." Louisa stared at him in the rearview mirror, torn between caution and curiosity. "Why?" "Because I'm trying to remember what it's like to have a real conversation without hidden agendas," he replied with an honesty that disarmed her. "And because that night when I woke up at home with your jacket, something in me changed." He opened the car door, but before getting out, he turned to her. "Tomorrow, I'll request another ride, same time. If you accept, great. If not, I'll understand. The choice is yours." And with that, he left, leaving Louisa with a whirlwind of thoughts and the app showing the fare amount, much higher than the journey would justify. He had given a generous tip once again. As she drove back to pick up the next passenger, Louisa tried to understand what was happening. It was crazy, obviously. A man like Raphael Alistair, who probably appeared in business magazines and frequented circles of power, shouldn't have genuine interest in someone like her. And yet there was an unquestionable sincerity in his eyes, a vulnerability that didn't match the image she had of rich and powerful people. "What am I getting myself into?" she asked herself, as London continued its rhythm around her, indifferent to the small drama beginning to unfold on its busy streets. The next morning, while serving tables at the cafe, Louisa couldn't stop thinking about Raphael's proposal. The idea of accepting a ride just to talk seemed absurd, almost like an unlikely modern fairy tale. Her friend Denise, who also worked as a waitress, noticed her distraction. "Where is your head today, Louisa?" "It's the third time you've gotten an order wrong," she commented, as they organized trays at the counter. Louisa sighed, deciding to share part of the story. "Remember the guy who came here yesterday? The one with the denim jacket? That handsome man in a suit who couldn't take his eyes off you? Hard to forget. He left a tip bigger than my week's salary. He requested a ride yesterday. I drive for the app at night, remember? And he said he'll request another one today, just to talk." Denise's eyes widened. "Wait, are you telling me a handsome businessman is paying to spend time with you and you're hesitating? Friend, that's every soap opera protagonist's dream." "It's not like that." Louisa shook her head, bothered by the simplification. "I have Peter to take care of, 2 bills to pay, and 0 time for romantic fantasies with men from worlds completely different from mine." "Who said romance? I'm talking about opportunity." Denise lowered her voice. "Look, if he's interested in you, even if it's just as a friend, it could open doors. Maybe he could recommend you for a better job, something that would give you more time with Peter." Louisa frowned. "I don't want to use anyone like that." "It's not using, Louisa. It's networking. Rich people do it all the time." Denise shrugged, picking up a tray and walking away to serve a newly occupied table. For the rest of the day, Denise's words echoed in Louisa's head. Not that she agreed with her friend. She had always been proud of achieving everything through her own effort, but she couldn't deny that life as a single mother was extremely difficult. Every day was a struggle against the clock and against a bank account always in the red. When she picked Peter up from school, she found him downcast, an unusual behavior for the always cheerful boy. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked as they walked to the bus stop. Peter kicked a pebble on the path. "Nothing." "Peter, I know that face. Did something happen at school?" The boy stopped, his brown eyes, identical to his mother's, welled up. "John Paul called me a poor kid. He said we're poor because you didn't study properly." Louisa felt her heart clench. She knelt down, reaching her son's height. "Peter, listen. We're not poor, we're hard workers. And I did study. I even have an incomplete degree in business administration, did you know? It's just that sometimes life takes different paths than we plan. Why didn't you finish university?" Louisa hesitated. How to explain to a child that she had dropped out of studies because she got pregnant at 22, and the child's father, instead of taking responsibility, had vanished. "Because I had you and you became my priority," she replied, gently touching her son's nose. "And I've never regretted it, not for a second." "But can we get rich someday?" Peter asked, with the typical innocence of childhood. "We can certainly improve our lives. And you know how? By working hard and studying a lot. That's why you need to be the best student in class, okay?" Peter nodded, seeming more cheerful. On the way home, he started talking about dinosaurs again, his favorite topic, while Louisa reflected on the conversation. It was to give Peter a better future that she juggled 2 jobs, sleeping only 5 hours a night and giving up any social life. When they arrived at the small apartment, her mother, Mrs. Celia, was already preparing dinner. At 65, with her grey hair always tied in a bun, she was the pillar that supported that family, taking care of Peter while Louisa worked at night. "How was your day, darling?" Mrs. Celia asked as Peter ran to his room to get his toys. "Normal," Louisa replied, avoiding mentioning the episode with Raphael. Her mother was extremely protective and certainly wouldn't approve of that unusual situation. After dinner and putting Peter to do his homework, Louisa prepared for her night shift. She put on jeans, a simple t-shirt and comfortable sneakers, her uniform for driving. Before leaving, she went to the room she shared with her son. "Mummy's going to work, my love. Grandma will stay with you." Peter, already in pajamas and lying down with his stuffed dinosaur, nodded sleepily. "Are you going to pick up important people today?" The question took her by surprise. "Why do you ask that?" "Because you're the best driver in the world. You deserve to take only important people." Louisa smiled, kissing her son's forehead. "You are the most important person in my world, did you know?" As she left for the night, Peter's question still echoed in her mind. Important people. Who defined what was important in this world? According to what criteria? Exactly at the time Raphael had mentioned, the app rang. A ride specifically requested for her, departing from Nexus Tech. Louisa took a deep breath and accepted. Upon arriving at the mirrored building, Raphael was already waiting for her on the pavement, wearing jeans and a polo shirt, a much more casual version of the executive she had known. He got into the front passenger seat, not the back as the first time. "Hi," he said with a slight smile. "Thanks for coming. Where are we going?" Louisa asked, maintaining professionalism. "How about a place where we can talk quietly? I know a view of the city that few frequent at night." Louisa hesitated. Picking up a passenger and taking him to a location not registered in the app was against the rules. Raphael noticed her hesitation. "Or we can just drive aimlessly if you prefer. The choice is yours." There was something so genuine in the way he spoke, respecting her boundaries, that Louisa found herself agreeing. "Let's drive a bit then." They drove along the London waterfront, passing by the South Bank where the River Thames reflected the city lights. The conversation flowed with surprising naturalness. Raphael asked about Peter, and Louisa found herself telling him about the incident at school. "That reminds me of my own childhood," Raphael commented, looking at the river. "Believe it or not, I was also that kid whom others called a poor kid." Louisa looked at him with disbelief. "You, the CEO of Nexus?" He laughed, a light, unpretentious sound. "Before being CEO of anything, I was the cleaner's son at the private school where I studied on scholarship. My mother cleaned the rooms where I attended classes. How did you manage to get where you are then?" "A lot of study, some opportunities, luck, and people who believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself." He paused. "My mother was the first. She worked 3 jobs to keep me in that school. She said education was the only path no one could take away from me." Louisa felt an unexpected connection. Wasn't that exactly what she told Peter? "I guess we have more in common than I imagined," she commented, slowing down to enjoy the river breeze. "That's why I felt so comfortable talking to you that first night," Raphael confessed. "You reminded me of where I came from, of who I really am, before all these meetings, contracts, and social events." They stopped at a natural viewpoint on the way to Canary Wharf, a place where few cars parked at that hour. The city stretched out before them, a carpet of lights against the dark sky. "Life is funny," Raphael said, breaking the silence. "I work so hard to prove I've overcome my origins, and in the end it's precisely those origins that keep me connected to something real." "And why do you work so hard?" Louisa asked. "You have enough money, I imagine." "In the beginning it was for my mother, to give her the comfort she deserved. After she passed," he paused, his voice slightly choked. "After that, it became inertia, and perhaps fear." "Fear of what?" "Of stopping and realizing that I built an empty life." That confession, so raw and honest, left Louisa speechless. She knew the feeling well, the exhaustion that comes not just from physical work, but from the constant struggle to maintain appearances, to pretend that everything is under control when, in reality, You are just one step ahead of chaos. I think we all have that fear, she finally replied, just manifested in different ways. They stayed there talking for over an hour. Raphael told her about the betrayal of his partner and best friend, Charles, who had tried to sell confidential company information to a competitor. He spoke about the loneliness of making decisions that affected hundreds of employees, about the constant pressure to grow, innovate, overcome. Louisa, in turn, shared stories about raising Peter alone, about small triumphs like when he learned to read before his classmates, about nights when she cried hidden in the bathroom when money wasn't enough to make it to the end of the month. When they finally decided to go back, something had changed between them. It wasn't romance nor exactly friendship, but a kind of complicity born of mutual recognition. On the way back, Raphael made an unexpected proposal. "Louisa, I have an idea. I'm looking for a personal driver, someone trustworthy to take me to appointments, pick me up from the airport, that kind of thing. The salary would be much better than what you earn with the app, with more flexible hours so you can take care of Peter." She braked abruptly at the red light, turning to face him. "Are you offering me a job?" "I am," he replied simply. "No ulterior motives, if that's what you're thinking. Just recognizing someone competent and reliable." Louisa was silent, processing the offer. It was tempting, very tempting, but also frightening. Accepting would mean giving up the independence she valued so much to become an employee of someone she barely knew. "I need to think," she finally said, when they arrived at Nexus Tech headquarters, where Raphael's car was parked. "Of course," he smiled, understanding. "No rush. Here's my card with my personal number." He wrote something on the back. "And this is the amount I'm offering per month." When Louisa looked at the number, she almost choked. It was more than she earned combining her two jobs, and with fewer hours. "Think carefully," Raphael said before getting out of the car. "And Louisa, thank you for the conversation. It was the most pleasant evening I've had in a long time." In the following weeks, Louisa couldn't stop thinking about the proposal. She discussed the matter with Mrs. Celia, who was initially skeptical. "Be careful, darling. A rich man offering a job like that out of the blue. There's something fishy." "It's not out of the blue, Mum. He knows me from the app. He knows I'm punctual, reliable. Even so, there's no such thing as a free lunch in this world." Despite her mother's reservations, Louisa continued to consider the offer. She did the math. With that salary, she could leave her job at the cafe, would have more time with Peter, and could even resume her studies at night, since her mother would be home to take care of the boy. It was a golden opportunity. After almost 3 weeks of reflection, she finally called Raphael. "I accept the job," she said without preamble, "but with one condition." "I'm listening," he replied, and she could feel the smile in his voice. "I want a formal contract with all labor rights, and well-defined hours so I can organize my life with Peter." "Done. Can you start on Monday?" And so Louisa's life took an unexpected turn. On her first day as Raphael Alistair's personal driver, she arrived at his condominium in Canary Wharf promptly at 7:30 a.m., as agreed. She wore black dress pants and a white shirt, the closest thing to a uniform she could put together with her limited budget. Raphael came down wearing a navy blue suit and a discreet tie. He smiled when he saw her, but maintained a professional tone. "Good morning, Louisa. We have a meeting in the city at 9 a.m. After that, lunch with investors in Kensington, and in the afternoon, I need to visit our Islington branch." "Understood," she replied, opening the door of the company car, a black sedan much more luxurious than her own vehicle, which would be stored during working hours. During that first day, Louisa observed Raphael in his professional environment. He was respected, assertive, charismatic when necessary, but she also noticed how his shoulders seemed more tense with each meeting, how his gaze lost its sparkle when he had to navigate the murky waters of corporate politics. On the way back to Canary Wharf, late in the afternoon, Raphael finally relaxed in the back seat. "How was your first day?" he asked. "Interesting," she replied honestly. "You're different when you're working." "It's what the world expects of me," he shrugged. "But I confess it's exhausting to maintain that persona all the time." Gradually, a routine was established. Louisa picked up Raphael every morning, drove him to his appointments, and sometimes waited hours in the car while he was in meetings. During this time, she studied for her university exams. She had decided to resume the business administration course she had abandoned. Raphael, in turn, seemed increasingly comfortable in her presence. On the commutes between appointments, they talked about everything: books, movies, childhood, memories, plans for the future. He began to ask for her opinion on company decisions, valuing her different perspective. "You think outside the box," he commented once, after she suggested a simple solution to a problem his team had been trying to solve for weeks. "It's refreshing." A month after starting the new job, something unexpected happened. Raphael had an important meeting with foreign investors and asked Louisa to wait for him, as the event might extend into the night. When he came out hours later, he was visibly shaken. "What's wrong?" she asked, concerned by his expression. "Nothing," he replied curtly, getting into the car. "Let's go." On the way to the condominium, the silence was heavy. Louisa respected his space but couldn't help but worry. When they arrived, Raphael made no mention of getting out of the car. "They want me to sell the company," he finally said, his voice low. "They say we need international capital to grow, that I'm limiting the business's potential with my emotional management. And is that bad? Selling would mean betraying everything I built, the values I stand for. We would turn a company that cares about its employees into just another money-making machine." He ran his hands over his face, tired. But refusing could mean losing competitiveness, leaving people jobless in the future. Louisa thought before answering. "What would your mother say?" The question took Raphael by surprise. He looked at her, a slight smile forming on his lips. "She would say that money doesn't buy peace of mind, and that decisions made out of fear are rarely good decisions. She sounds like a wise woman." "She was," he replied, with evident longing in his voice. "Very." That night, before getting out of the car, Raphael briefly held Louisa's hand. "Thank you for listening to me, and for reminding me of what truly matters." The touch, even brief, sent an electric current through Louisa's body. She pulled her hand away, embarrassed. "It's just my job," she replied more coldly than she intended. But it wasn't just work, and they both knew it. Something was growing between them, something that transcended the professional relationship, and that neither of them knew exactly how to name or deal with. The following week, Peter fell ill. A severe flu that left him with a high fever and persistent cough. Louisa called Raphael early, explaining that she couldn't work. "No problem," he replied, understanding. "Peter's health comes first. Do you need anything? Can I help in any way?" "No, thank you. My mother is here with me. We'll manage." 2 hours later, the apartment doorbell rang. When Mrs. Celia opened it, she found Raphael Alistair standing at the door, carrying pharmacy bags and a giant stuffed dinosaur. "What are you doing here?" Louisa asked, astonished, when she saw him in the living room. "I came to see how you all are," he replied simply, "and I brought some things that might help." Peter, even sick, was radiant with the gift. Raphael sat on the edge of the boy's bed and talked to him about different species of dinosaurs, demonstrating surprising knowledge on the subject. "Did you research dinosaurs to talk to him?" Louisa whispered, while Peter admired the new toy. Raphael shrugged with a slight smile. "Maybe. I thought it would be a good icebreaker." The gesture touched Louisa deeply. It wasn't just the consideration of coming to see how they were, or the expensive medicines he had brought, but the fact that he had prepared to talk to Peter, genuinely wanting to please the boy. Mrs. Celia, who initially watched the visitor with suspicion, ended up inviting him for lunch. Raphael accepted without hesitation, helping to set the table and effusively praising the home-cooked meal. "It's been years since I've had such good food," he commented, serving himself more rice and beans. "Don't you have a housekeeper at home, young man?" Mrs. Celia asked, direct as always. "I have a lady who comes 3 times a week to clean and organize," he replied honestly. "But I live alone and usually eat out or order delivery." "A house without family is not a home," the old woman declared, with the wisdom of her years. The comment caused a momentary silence, broken by Raphael's cell phone ringing. It was an important call from the company. "I need to take this," he said, getting up. "Excuse me." While Raphael spoke on the phone on the balcony, Mrs. Celia approached her daughter. "He seems like a good young man," she whispered. "But be careful, darling. He lives in a very different world from ours." "He's just my boss, Mum." "I know." Mrs. Celia smiled, skeptical. "No boss crosses the city to bring medicine for an employee's son. How's no employee looks at her boss the way you look at him?" Louisa blushed but had no time to respond. Raphael returned, announcing that he needed to go back to the company for an emergency. Before leaving, he went to the room to say goodbye to Peter, promising to return soon to talk more about paleontology. At the door, he said goodbye to Louisa with a quick hug. "Take good care of him, and if you need more days off, just let me know." "Thank you, Raphael." "For everything." After he left, Louisa stood at the door watching the car drive away. A whirlwind of contradictory emotions invaded her. Something was growing in her chest, something she feared to name. "Be careful, darling," Mrs. Celia repeated as if reading her thoughts. "When two such different worlds meet, someone always gets hurt." Louisa knew her mother was right, but she also knew that sometimes the heart follows paths that reason advises against. And hers, stubborn as always, seemed determined to follow in Raphael Alistair's direction, with all the complications that might bring. In the days that followed, while taking care of Peter at home, Louisa reflected deeply on her situation. She was developing feelings for her boss, something she had always considered a ridiculous soap opera cliché. But real life sometimes surpassed fiction in its power to surprise us. Raphael called daily to check on Peter. During the calls, they talked about his day at the company, about the boy's progress, about trivialities that kept the conversation light and pleasant. In one of these calls, he made an unexpected invitation. "When Peter is better, I'd like to take both of you to visit the Manchester Museum of Natural History. They have a new exhibition on British dinosaurs that I think he would love." Louisa's heart raced. That sounded very much like a family outing. "Raphael, wouldn't that be inappropriate?" he completed, guessing her thoughts. "Perhaps, probably, but I'm tired of worrying about what's appropriate or expected. For the first time in a long time, I've found people who make me feel real." He paused. "But I understand if you don't want to mix things up." Louisa took a deep breath before answering. "Peter will love it. And so will I." The Manchester Museum of Natural History was an imposing building, with a facade that blended modern and classical elements. Peter could barely contain his excitement as they climbed the steps of the main entrance, his eyes shining with anticipation. Raphael had sent a car to pick them up at the airport, and the entire trip, from leaving London to arriving in Manchester, had been planned with care that Louisa had never experienced before. "Look, Mum, a T-Rex," Peter shouted upon seeing the giant skeleton in the main hall. Raphael smiled, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Actually, that's a Giganotosaurus, a South American cousin of the T-Rex. Did you know it lived here in England millions of years ago?" Peter looked at Raphael with absolute admiration. "Really? Right here where we are?" "Well, not exactly here, but in lands that are now part of England. The world was very different back then." Louisa observed the interaction with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. It was evident that Raphael had prepared for that outing, studying about dinosaurs to impress Peter, and it was working. The boy, normally shy with strangers, held Raphael's hand as they ran from one exhibition to another, asking questions that were answered with patience and enthusiasm. During the visit, a special guide, apparently a personal friend of Raphael's, accompanied them, showing them areas not normally open to the public. Peter was able to touch real fossils, see how paleontologists worked on restoring new discoveries, and even received a professional excavation kit as a gift from the museum shop. While they had lunch at the museum cafe, Peter finally asked the question Louisa feared. "Raphael, are you going to be my new dad?" A heavy silence fell over the table. Louisa choked on the juice she was drinking, while Raphael seemed momentarily speechless, something rare for such an articulate man. "Peter," Louisa finally managed to say. "What kind of question is that?" "Apologize to Raphael right now." "Why?" The boy seemed genuinely confused. "Maurice in my class has a new dad. His mum said she was just waiting for the right one to show up." Raphael regained his composure and smiled gently. "Peter, your mum and I are friends. Good friends, and I really enjoy spending time with both of you. But these adult things are complicated, you understand?" Peter nodded, though it was obvious he didn't fully understand. "But you like my mum, don't you? You look at her like the prince looks at the princess in movies." It was Raphael's turn to blush, something Louisa had never imagined seeing. The powerful CEO of Nexus Tech, flustered by a 5-year-old boy. "I think it's time we saw the prehistoric marine animals exhibition," Louisa said, changing the subject and quickly standing up. I heard they have an amazing mosasaur on the 3rd floor. The rest of the day passed without further embarrassing moments, but Peter's question hung in the air like a silent presence. When they finally returned to the hotel where they would be staying, Raphael had insisted on booking 2 connected suites in one of Manchester's best hotels. Peter fell asleep almost instantly, exhausted from the day's emotions. Louisa and Raphael sat on the balcony of her suite, watching the city lights. A comfortable silence settled between them until Raphael finally broke it. He's an amazing boy, he commented with sincere admiration. Intelligent, curious, sensitive. You've done a great job raising him. Thank you, Louisa replied, feeling pride warm her chest. It wasn't easy, but every sacrifice was worth it when I see who he's becoming. About what he asked at lunch, Louisa raised her hand, interrupting him. Please, we don't need to talk about that. He's a child, he says what comes to his mind. Raphael nodded, respecting her decision. But after a few minutes it was Louisa who brought up the subject again. Raphael, what are we doing? All of this. The trip, the museum, this absurdly luxurious hotel. It's not normal. You're my boss. He looked at her intensely, his eyes reflecting the city lights. Is that what I am to you? Just your boss? The question hung between them, laden with unspoken meanings. Louisa felt her heart race. I don't know what you are, she replied honestly. And that scares me. I come from a place where things are simple, direct, where people call things by their name. But this between us, I can't name it. Raphael moved closer, taking her hands in his. I'm scared too, Louisa. I come from a world where everything is a transaction, where relationships are strategic, where feelings are seen as weakness. And then you appeared with your brutal honesty, your unwavering integrity, and your heart so open to that incredible boy. He paused. And suddenly all the certainties I built began to crumble. Their faces were close now, their breaths mingling in the cold Manchester night air. Louisa could feel the tension growing between them, the magnetism that had pulled them towards each other since that first night in the car. The sound of Raphael's cell phone broke the moment. He looked at the screen and frowned. I need to take this. It's the company. Louisa nodded, a part of her relieved by the interruption. The moment had passed, but the tension remained, pulsating beneath the surface of their interaction. While Raphael spoke on the phone in the living room, Louisa went to check on Peter. The boy was sleeping soundly, hugging the new stuffed dinosaur Raphael had bought at the museum shop. She adjusted the blanket over him, feeling a wave of love and protection. What was she doing, allowing her son to get attached to a man who lived in a completely different world from theirs, creating expectations that could end in disappointment? When she returned to the balcony, Raphael had already ended the call and seemed worried. Problems? She asked. Charles is trying to convince the board to accept the company's sale proposal, he replied, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. I need to go back to London tomorrow morning for an emergency meeting. I understand, Louisa said, trying to hide her disappointment. The weekend in Manchester, which was supposed to last 2 days, would be cut short. Peter will be disappointed. I'm sorry, Raphael said sincerely, but I promise to make it up to both of you. He held her hands again. And Louisa, about what we were talking about, I don't want you to think this was just a whim or a fantasy for me. What I feel for you, for Peter, it's real. Perhaps the most real I've felt in a long time. Before she could respond, he leaned in and lightly touched her lips with his, a soft, almost reverent kiss. Louisa felt a warmth spread through her body, a long-forgotten sensation awakening in her chest. When they parted, Raphael smiled. We need to go back early, but we still have tonight. How about we order room service and watch a movie? I'm sure Peter would love it. And so, in a hotel suite in Manchester, far from the pressures of their daily lives, they spent a few hours pretending to be just a normal family, sharing pizza, laughter, and an animated movie about, of course, dinosaurs. The return to London the next day was silent. Peter slept for almost the entire flight, exhausted from the adventure. Raphael seemed worried, constantly checking messages on his phone. Louisa reflected on the events of the previous night, the kiss, the closeness, the unspoken words that hung between them. When they landed, a car was already waiting to take Raphael directly to Nexus Tech headquarters. He said goodbye quickly, kissing Peter's sleeping forehead and squeezing Louisa's hand. "I'll call you later," he promised, before getting into the executive car. Louisa and Peter returned home in a regular taxi, the difference between their two worlds again evident in the contrast. In the days that followed, Raphael was completely immersed in the company crisis. The nightly calls continued, but they were brief and focused mainly on the day's events. He explained that Charles, his ex-best friend and now internal rival, was lobbying foreign investors to force the sale of Nexus, arguing that the company needed less emotional and more strategic management. "They're using my employee benefits policies against me," Raphael said during a call, exhaustion evident in his voice. "They say I spend too much on well-being and too little on aggressive expansion, that I'm too soft to lead in the current market." "And what do you think?" Louisa asked, as she finished organizing Peter's lunchbox for the next day. "I think they don't understand that taking care of people is an investment, not an expense. My employees are loyal, work better, innovate more. But that kind of result doesn't show up in the charts they love so much." The company crisis continued to intensify in the following weeks. Louisa returned to work as Raphael's driver, but now the dynamic between them was different. The kiss in Manchester had changed something fundamental, creating an intimacy they were both still learning to navigate. On a particularly tense morning, Raphael got into the car looking like he hadn't slept all night. "Meeting at the Canary Wharf branch today," he said, rubbing his tired eyes. "Then lunch with the board at the Ivy." Louisa nodded, concerned about his state. "Are you okay? You look exhausted." "I am," he hesitated. "Actually, I'm not." Charles managed to convince 3 of the 5 board members in favor of the sale. "I'm losing my own company, Louisa." She wished she could do something, say something that would alleviate that evident pain. But what could a former rideshare driver understand about corporate disputes at such high levels? "Maybe you need to show them what they would lose," she suggested finally. "Not with numbers and charts, but with real stories, the people who have been positively impacted by your leadership style." Raphael looked at her in the rearview mirror, a spark of interest in his tired eyes. "Go on." "Well, you always say your company is different because it cares about people. So show that. Take the board to see that technological training program you run in the communities, or the employees who were able to study thanks to the company's scholarships." A slight smile appeared on Raphael's lips. "You're brilliant, you know. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Numbers they can get from any CEO. But the human impact, that's what sets us apart." That day, instead of going to the branch as planned, Raphael asked Louisa to take him to one of the technical schools sponsored by Nexus, located in an East London community. There, dozens of young people learned programming, digital design, and other technological skills that prepared them for the job market. Raphael spoke with the students, listened to their stories, took photos, and recorded testimonials. He did the same at the training center for vulnerable women that the company maintained in another community. In the afternoon, when he finally arrived at the board meeting, he was armed not with spreadsheets, but with real stories of transformation. Louisa waited in the car during the meeting, which stretched for hours. When Raphael finally came out, there was a renewed sparkle in his eyes. "I managed to postpone the vote," he said, getting into the car with renewed energy. "I showed them what really matters, what we built beyond market value." At least 2 board members seemed swayed. "I have a week to prepare a counterproposal." "That's great." Louisa smiled, genuinely happy for him. "I knew you could make them see." Raphael briefly held her hand. "It was your idea, Louisa. You reminded me of what truly matters." That small victory seemed to have renewed Raphael's energy. In the following days, he worked tirelessly on his counterproposal, frequently consulting Louisa on details that she, surprisingly, was able to offer valuable perspectives on. "You have a natural instinct for business," he commented once, during an impromptu dinner at his office, as they worked late. "Have you ever thought about going back to study business administration?" Louisa looked up from the documents she was reviewing. "Actually, I went back to doing the distance learning course. I use the waiting time while you're in meetings to study." Raphael looked at her with genuine admiration. "You're incredible, you know. You work, you take care of Peter, you study. When do you find time to breathe?" She laughed. "I breathe in the intervals between one task and another." There was an ease between them now, Complicity that transcended the initial professional relationship. Raphael frequently had dinner at Louisa's apartment, much to Peter's delight. Mrs. Celia, who was initially suspicious, began to surrender to the businessman's unpretentious charm, especially after he personally fixed the kitchen faucet that had been dripping for months. "He may be rich, but he's not afraid to get his hands dirty," the old woman commented, impressed. That says a lot about a man. Everything seemed to be heading for a happy ending, Raphael fighting to maintain his company with its principles intact, Louisa finding a new professional path, and the two exploring the feelings growing between them. Until on a Wednesday night, everything changed. Raphael had an important event, a charitable gala dinner organized by one of Nexus's main investors. Louisa dropped him off at the venue and waited in the car as usual. However, after almost an hour, she received a message from him asking her to come inside. "I need you in here," the message read. "It's important." Confused, Louisa checked her appearance in the rearview mirror. She was wearing her usual work clothes, black dress pants and a white shirt. Nothing appropriate for a gala event. But if Raphael asked, it must be for a good reason. Upon entering the luxurious hall, she immediately felt out of place. Women in designer dresses, men in impeccable tuxedos, jewelry that probably cost more than everything she owned. She tried to locate Raphael among the crowd and found him talking to a group of executives. When he saw her, he waved her over. Louisa walked among the guests, feeling curious glances and some openly critical ones about her simple attire. "Ah, finally," Raphael said with a tense smile when she arrived. "Everyone, this is Louisa, my driver," one of the men completed with a condescending smile. "Raphael told us about your diversified hiring policy." The comment, laden with thinly veiled prejudice, made Louisa feel as if she had been slapped. She looked at Raphael, expecting him to correct the man, to defend not only her but the very relationship they were building. But Raphael merely smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and changed the subject. "Louisa is helping me with a special project in the communities. In fact, that's why I asked her to come. George, you were interested in learning more about our technological training program, weren't you?" The rest of the conversation passed in a blur for Louisa. Raphael had used her as an example of his social project, reducing her to a demonstration of his corporate conscience, a trophy of his benevolence. The personal relationship they had been building, the kiss in Manchester, the night spent talking about dreams and fears, all of it seemed to have been erased in that moment. When the group finally dispersed, Louisa turned to Raphael, the hurt evident in her eyes. "Is that why you called me? To be your walking charity project?" Raphael seemed genuinely confused by her reaction. "What are you talking about?" "I thought it would be good for you to meet these people. Make contacts. George controls a foundation that might be interested in your case for a full scholarship." "My case?" Louisa's voice rose an octave. "Is that what I am to you? A social assistance case? The poor driver you're helping to educate?" "No, of course not." Raphael seemed increasingly lost. "You're misunderstanding everything. I just wanted to help." "Help?" Louisa struggled to keep her voice down, aware of the glances around them. "You called me here, knowing I would be inappropriately dressed to show me off as an example of your big heart. And when that man reduced me to your driver, you said nothing. Not a word." Understanding finally seemed to hit Raphael. His face paled. "Louisa, it wasn't that. The situation is complicated now, with the company dispute. I need these investors on my side. And to have them on your side, you put me in my place, is that it?" Tears threatened to fall, but she refused to give that satisfaction to those watching them with poorly disguised curiosity. "Now I understand. In your house, in my apartment at the hotel in Manchester, I can be something more. But in public, in your circles, I'm just the employee, the social project, the inspiring story for you to tell at cocktail parties." "That's not fair," Raphael protested, lowering his voice. "You know what I feel for you, for Peter, but this world," he gestured around, indicating the luxurious hall, "this world has rules, expectations. And you chose to follow those rules instead of defending what we have," Louisa concluded, the disappointment palpable in her voice. "Fine. Message received, Mr. Alastair. Now, if you'll excuse me, your driver will be waiting in the car when you're ready to go." She spun on her heels and quickly left the hall, tears finally falling as soon as she reached the empty corridor. How could she have been so naive? Raphael might have grown up in humble conditions, as he claimed, but he now belonged to this world of privilege and appearances. And in the end, when forced to choose between defending her and maintaining his position in that world, the choice had been clear. In the car, Louisa tried to compose herself. She had been foolish to believe that a relationship between such different worlds could work. Mrs. Celia had been right from the start. When two worlds collide, someone always gets hurt. And this time it was her. And worse, possibly Peter too, who was already starting to get attached to Raphael. When Raphael finally left the event, hours later, he found Louisa sitting rigidly at the wheel, her red eyes the only indication of the inner turmoil. "Louisa, we need to talk," he said, getting into the back seat. "Address, please," she replied. "Professional and distant. Please listen to me." "You were right. See, I should have said something. I should have corrected George. I got caught between two worlds and made the wrong choice. Peninsula Gardens in Canary Wharf or Nexus Tech Office?" she insisted, ignoring his words. Raphael sighed, defeated. "Condominium, please." The entire journey was made in silence. When they arrived at the luxury condominium, Raphael made one last attempt. "What I feel for you is real, Louisa. More real than anything I've ever felt. Please don't let one mistake ruin what we're building." Louisa finally looked at him in the rearview mirror, her eyes meeting his. "The problem wasn't the mistake, Raphael. It was the revelation. That deep down, for your world, I'll always be the driver, the waitress, the social project, and you'll always be the benefactor, the savior. It's not a relationship of equals. It never will be." "That's not true," he protested. "What matters is what we feel, not what others think. If that were true, you would have defended me today." She looked away, staring at the steering wheel again. "I'll be here tomorrow at the usual time for work. After all, I still need the job." But what was beyond that? "It's over." Raphael sat in the car for long moments as if waiting for her to change her mind. Finally, with a heavy sigh, he got out without saying anything more. That night, Louisa cried silently in the bathroom after making sure Peter was asleep. She had been foolish to believe in fairy tales, to think she could belong to Raphael Alistair's world. Different worlds, Mrs. Celia said, and as always her mother was right. The next day the atmosphere between them was one of icy formality. Raphael tried several times to resume the subject, but Louisa maintained her professional demeanor, responding only when necessary. The situation lasted for a whole week. Raphael seemed increasingly disheartened, torn between the battle for the company and the evident personal loss. Louisa, in turn, hid her sadness behind a mask of professional efficiency. Peter constantly asked about Raphael, wanting to know when he would come for dinner again, when they would have another dinosaur adventure, as he called the trip to Manchester. Louisa evaded the questions, inventing appointments and meetings, unable to explain to her son that she had built sandcastles that the first wave had washed away. Everything changed on a rainy Thursday, similar to the one when they had met. Louisa had driven Raphael to the decisive board meeting, where the company's sale proposal would be voted on. He had entered the building with tense shoulders, carrying the weight of the world. While waiting in the car, Louisa thought about how their lives had intertwined and separated in such a short time. Part of her still ached, still missed the conversations, the smiles, the feeling of truly being seen by someone after so long. Her cell phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Peter's school. "Mrs. Rivers, this is the little scientist school secretary. Peter had a fall during recess and hit his head. He's conscious, but we're recommending he be taken to the hospital for evaluation." Louisa's world stopped. Her son. Her Peter, injured. With trembling hands, she sent a message to Raphael, explaining the emergency and that she would have to leave. She didn't wait for a response. Peter's health came before any professional obligation. She drove like never before, her heart racing, 1,000 catastrophic thoughts running through her mind. When she arrived at the school, she found Peter in the infirmary, with a bandage on his forehead and tears in his eyes. "Mum!" he exclaimed, reaching out his arms to her. "I fell off the swing. It hurts." Louisa hugged him tightly, the relief of seeing him conscious and speaking mixing with concern for the injury. The nurse explained that the fall had been significant, and that as a precaution, he should undergo tests to rule out any complications. At the nearest public hospital, the wait was agonizing. Hours passed, with Peter becoming increasingly drowsy, a symptom the doctors had warned her to watch out for. Louisa was about to lose her mind when she heard a familiar voice call her name. "Louisa!" Turning around, she saw Raphael running down the hospital corridor, his impeccable suit contrasting with an expression of absolute panic. "How is he? What did the doctors say?" Louisa, too surprised to maintain the distant demeanor of the past few days, replied, "We're still waiting." He hit his head. "He's drowsy, but the doctors say it might be normal. We're waiting for a CT scan, but the queue is long." Raphael nodded, determined. "Leave it to me." Before she could protest, he left, speaking on the phone with someone. Minutes later, a different medical team appeared, calling Peter's name. Somehow Raphael had managed to expedite the service. During the exam, they waited side by side in the waiting room, the silence between them now laden not with resentment, but with shared concern. "How did you know where we were?" Louisa finally asked. "You mentioned the hospital in the message," he replied. "I came as soon as I could. The meeting. It doesn't matter now." "But it was the decisive vote, wasn't it? About the company sale?" Raphael shrugged. "I didn't stay to find out. I left in the middle, as soon as I received your message. Charles is probably toasting to victory now, preparing to take my place. You abandoned the most important meeting of your career to come here." Incredulity was evident in Louisa's voice. "Yes," he replied simply. "And I would do it again." "Why?" Raphael stopped the car at a red light and turned to face her. "Because in that room, when I read your message, everything became clear. The values of the company I so strongly defend, caring for people, prioritizing what really matters, I was about to betray them to save the very company. The irony is almost poetic, don't you think?" He smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "And more than that, I realized that if I had to choose between Nexus and you two, there would be no choice. It would be you. Always." The light turned green and he started driving again, leaving Louisa to absorb his words. Something was changing between them again, something fundamental. When they arrived at the apartment, Mrs. Celia was waiting anxiously. Raphael carried a sleeping Peter to his bed, with the gentleness of someone handling something infinitely precious. Then, in the small living room, he explained to Mrs. Celia everything the doctors had said about Peter's care for the next 24 hours. The old woman listened attentively, nodding. When he finished, she held his hands in hers. "Thank you for taking care of them," she said with the simplicity of someone who finally recognizes a truth. "They are all I have." "I know," Raphael replied. "They are becoming everything to me, too." That night, Raphael stayed. Not in the way they had once imagined, sharing intimacy and passion, but in a much more significant way. Taking turns with Louisa to check on Peter during the night, making tea in the small kitchen when she seemed exhausted, holding her hand when fear threatened to return. In the morning, when Peter woke up in good spirits, as if nothing had happened, the incredible resilience of childhood, Raphael received several calls. He answered them all in the building corridor, so as not to disturb the family. When he returned, his face was unreadable. "I need to go," he said, visibly reluctant. "There have been developments at the company." Louisa nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Of course. I understand." He knelt to say goodbye to Peter, who was playing with his dinosaurs in the living room, seemingly recovered. "I'll be back to see you soon, scientist. And maybe we can plan another adventure when you're fully recovered. How about that?" Peter smiled, hugging him around the neck. "Promise?" "I promise," Raphael replied with a seriousness that surprised Louisa. At the door, they said goodbye with a restrained hug, laden with unspoken words. "Thank you for yesterday," she said softly. Raphael held her face with one hand, a gesture so tender it made her heart race. "Louisa, when things settle down, we need to talk. About us, about the future, about what truly matters?" She nodded, unable to trust her own voice. He smiled, kissed her lightly on the forehead and left. That day passed slowly for Louisa, torn between taking care of Peter and thinking about what had happened. Raphael had abandoned the most important meeting of his professional career for them. What did that mean? And what would happen now with the company, with her job, with everything? That night, when Peter was already asleep and she was trying to study, unable to concentrate, the doorbell rang. It was late, almost 10 p.m. Concerned, Louisa opened the door. Raphael was standing there without his jacket, his shirt wrinkled, looking simultaneously exhausted and strangely light. "May I come in?" he asked. Louisa stepped aside, allowing him to pass. He entered, looking around as if seeing the small apartment for the first time. "What happened?" she asked, concerned about his appearance. Raphael smiled, a smile that didn't match the tiredness in his eyes. "I lost the company and gained my freedom." Louisa blinked a few times, processing the sentence. "What do you mean you lost the company?" Raphael sat on the worn sofa in the small living room, running his hands through his hair in a gesture she already knew well, a sign that he was reorganizing his thoughts. "The vote continued without me yesterday. Charles managed to convince the board to accept the sale proposal to the Canadian group." He took a deep breath. "My contract had a clause that guaranteed me a generous percentage of the sale, so financially I'm more than fine. But Nexus, as I conceived it, as I built it, it's over." Louisa sat beside him, her hand finding his in an automatic gesture of comfort. "I'm sorry. I know how much the company meant to you. The most ironic thing," Raphael continued with a melancholic smile, "is that I don't feel the despair I expected to feel. When I left that meeting room to go to the hospital yesterday, I thought I was abandoning my dream. But today, signing the papers for the transfer of control, I realized that the dream was no longer the same." "What do you mean?" He turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with a new intensity. "Nexus started as a dream to create a different company, one that treated people as people, not as resources, one that could transform lives. But at some point between investment rounds and expansion, it started to become just a business. A very valuable business, but just a business. And that's not enough for you," Louisa concluded, not as a question but a statement. "No," Raphael admitted, "not anymore. Especially after—" He paused, searching for the right words. "After finding something that reminded me of what truly matters." The air between them seemed charged with electricity. Louisa felt her heart race, a confusing mixture of hope and fear taking hold of her. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice little more than a whisper. Raphael released her hand and stood up, walking to the small window that overlooked the street. Outside, London pulsed, indifferent to the personal dramas unfolding in every apartment, in every heart. "Now," he turned to face her, "now I start over. With the money from the sale, I can start something new, something truly aligned with my values, something that makes a difference." "What kind of thing?" "A foundation, perhaps, or an incubator focused on social startups, something that combines technology with real impact." His eyes shone with renewed enthusiasm. "I already have some ideas." Louisa smiled, genuinely happy for him. It was evident that despite the loss of the company, Raphael had found a new direction, a new purpose. "And what about us?" The question escaped before she could contain it. Raphael walked back to her, sitting down again. He took her hands in his gaze direct and sincere. "It depends on you, Louisa. I know I made mistakes. At that event, I let my fears and insecurities speak louder. I was afraid of losing a world I'm not even sure I truly want to belong to. And now I understand that some worlds are worth losing if it means finding what is truly important." He squeezed her hands lightly. "You and Peter, you showed me a different way to see life, a more authentic, more real way. And I realize that's what I want, no matter what others think or expect of me." Louisa felt tears forming in her eyes. There was so much sincerity in his words, so much genuine vulnerability, but still doubt persisted. "Raphael, our worlds are still very different. You may have lost the company, but you're still who you are, a rich, educated man, with doors open in places where I wouldn't even be allowed in the front door." "Different worlds can meet, Louisa," he replied softly. "My own story proves that. The cleaner's son who became CEO. Who says we can't create our own world with our own rules?" Before she could respond, a noise from the bedroom interrupted the conversation. It was Peter calling for his mother. Louisa immediately stood up. "I need to check on him." Raphael nodded, understanding. Of course. In the small bedroom, lit only by the dinosaur-shaped nightlight, Peter was sitting on the bed, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "I had a nightmare, Mummy," he murmured, still half asleep. Louisa sat on the edge of the bed, stroking his hair. "It's okay, my love. It was just a bad dream. Do you want to tell me what it was?" Peter bit his lower lip, hesitant. I dreamed you were leaving and wouldn't come back, like my dad did." The declaration hit the adults like a punch. Louisa felt the air leave her lungs. She never imagined Peter would associate Raphael with the absent father figure, much less that he would fear his abandonment. Raphael, visibly moved, placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Peter, look at me," he asked in a gentle but firm voice. "I'm not your biological father, you know that, right?" The boy nodded, his big eyes fixed on Raphael. "But I want you to know something very important. I care deeply about you and your mum. And when I care about someone, I don't abandon them. Never." "Promise?" Peter asked, his small voice laden with hope and fear. Raphael looked briefly at Louisa, as if seeking approval for what he was about to say. She, with tears in her eyes, nodded almost imperceptibly. "I promise, Peter, and you know why. Because family isn't just about sharing blood. Family is about who chooses to stay, who chooses to love, who chooses to care. And I choose you. If you choose me, too." Peter smiled, the fear dissipating from his eyes. "I choose you," he declared with the simplicity of childhood. Then he looked at his mother. "And you, Mummy? Do you choose him too?" Louisa felt the weight of that innocent question. It wasn't just about that moment. It was about trusting again, about believing that different worlds could truly meet in a common space. "I'm learning to choose, my love," she replied honestly. "Day after day." The answer seemed to satisfy Peter, who lay back down. In a few minutes, lulled by the soft voices of the adults, he fell asleep again, this time with a slight smile on his lips. Back in the living room, Louisa and Raphael sat side by side on the sofa. A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind of silence that only exists between people who don't need to fill every moment with words. "What you said to him," Louisa began, finally, "about family being who chooses to stay. It was beautiful." "And true," Raphael replied, his eyes meeting hers. "My mother used to say something similar. She said that family are the people you would fight for, even when all other battles seem lost." Louisa smiled, recalling. "Mrs. Celia has a similar saying. She says family is who sees you on your worst day and still chooses to come back the next day." Raphael took her hand in his. "Louisa, I know we still have a lot to build, a lot to learn about each other. I know I made mistakes and will probably make others. But I want you to know that for me, you and Peter are already family, the family I chose, the family I will fight for no matter what battles I need to face." His words touched Louisa's heart deeply. There was so much sincerity, so much genuine vulnerability in that declaration. And yet doubt persisted. "Raphael, what about your world? The people who are part of it? The events, the dinners, the expectations? One of these days you'll be ashamed of me again." He shook his head, determined. "I won't be. And you know why? Because I realize that's no longer my world. Maybe it never truly was. It was a role I played, a mask I wore. The real Raphael is the cleaner's son, who never forgot his origins. He's the man who prefers a night of pizza and a movie with you to any gala dinner. And what if I never fit into that environment? Then we'll create our own environment," he replied simply. "One where we both feel comfortable, where Peter can grow up understanding both the value of hard work and the privilege he will have. A place between worlds, our own world." The idea was so beautiful, so hopeful, that Louisa felt her heart open a little more. Maybe it was possible. Maybe two different worlds could truly meet, not in destructive collision, but in a harmonious dance that created something new, something unique. "I'm willing to try," she finally said, a shy smile forming on her lips. Raphael smiled back, leaning in to kiss her. This time there was no hesitation, no doubts. Just two people choosing each other, choosing to build something together, despite the differences, despite the obstacles. When they parted, Raphael had a mischievous glint in his eyes. "I have a proposal for you." "I'm listening," Louisa replied, intrigued. "I want you to be my partner." The declaration caught her completely off guard. "Partner? In what?" "In my new venture. The foundation or incubator I mentioned. I want you to be part of it from the beginning. Not as an employee, not as a companion, but as an equal, as a business partner." Louisa stared at him, skeptical. "Raphael, I haven't even finished my degree yet. What can I offer a business of that scale?" "A perspective I lack. Emotional intelligence, pragmatism, the ability to see beyond spreadsheets and charts, to understand the real people we want to impact. He squeezed her hands, excited. Remember how your idea saved my presentation to the board? How you instinctively understood that real stories would have more impact than numbers? That's exactly the perspective I need. The proposal was tempting but frightening. Louisa bit her lip, thoughtful. I don't want charity, Raphael. I don't want to be your partner just because we're, well, whatever we are. Not for a second did I think of this as charity, he replied, serious. It's an investment in you, in your potential, in the unique vision you have. And yes, it's also a way for us to build something together, something that transcends our personal relationship, something that can be a legacy. The word legacy resonated with Louisa. She had always dreamed of leaving a better world for Peter, of being an example for her son. This could be an opportunity not only to improve her own life, but to positively impact the lives of many people. I'll think about it, she replied finally. It's an important decision. I need to be sure it's the right path. Raphael nodded, respecting her caution. All the time you need. There's no rush. In the days that followed, Louisa and Raphael's lives entered a new rhythm. She had naturally lost her job as a driver, as Raphael was no longer CEO of Nexus, but he insisted on helping her financially while she considered his proposal and finished her degree. Consider it an investment in the future of my possible partner, he would say. When she protested, Peter, fully recovered from the accident, flourished with Raphael's constant presence in their lives. Together, they built dinosaur cities in the living room, visited museums on weekends, and had long conversations about how stegosauruses defended themselves from predators. Mrs. Celia, initially skeptical about the relationship, began to surrender upon seeing the happiness of her daughter and grandson. More importantly, by witnessing how Raphael treated her family, with respect, affection, and without ever trying to impose his financial advantage as superiority. He has a good heart, the old woman admitted one night as she and Louisa washed dinner dishes. Raphael was in Peter's room, reading a bedtime story. That's rare, darling. Rarer than money. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? Louisa asked, insecurity still present. Our worlds are so different. Mrs. Celia dried her hands on her apron and held her daughter's face between them, a gesture she had made since Louisa was a child. Darling, sometimes God puts people in our path to show us that the world is bigger than we imagine. Raphael may have come from another world, but he chose yours. That says a lot. Her mother's words echoed in Louisa for days. Choices, that's what it was all about in the end. Not the worlds they came from, but the worlds they chose to build together. 2 months after that decisive night, Louisa finally gave her answer. They were in Raphael's new office, a modest space compared to the sumptuousness of Nexus, but cozy and full of potential. She had been invited to see the initial plans for the foundation he was creating. Nexus Social, Louisa read on the document he showed her. You kept the name. I kept the original dream, Raphael corrected, of creating connections that transform lives. I just changed how. She looked at the initial projects, technological training programs in underprivileged communities, an incubator for social impact startups, scholarships for promising low-income youth. It was ambitious, inspiring, and fully aligned with the values Raphael had always championed. I accept, Louisa said suddenly. Raphael looked up from the papers, surprised. Accept what? To be your partner. To build this with you. She smiled, the decision finally clear in her mind. But with one condition. I'm listening. I want to finish my degree first. I want to enter this project not only with my perspective and intuition, but also with formal knowledge, with the right tools. Raphael smiled, proud. Done, and I can help with that too. Not financially, he added quickly, seeing she was about to protest. But I can take care of Peter some nights for you to study. I can help with contacts for internships, that kind of thing. That would be perfect, Louisa admitted, touched by the respect he showed for her independence and determination. At that moment, looking at the plans for the foundation they would create together, for the future they were beginning to build, Louisa finally understood what Mrs. Celia meant. It wasn't about different worlds colliding, but about people choosing to create a new space, where differences were not barriers, but complements. A year passed. Nexus Social grew beyond initial expectations, impacting hundreds of young people through its training programs. Louisa, now with a degree in business administration and pursuing a specialization in social project management, had officially assumed the role of project director for the foundation. Peter, now 6, attended a good school and remained obsessed with dinosaurs, but now also showed interest in technology, a clear influence from Raphael, who had become a constant and loving presence in his life. As for Louisa and Raphael, their relationship grew in depth and maturity. They learned to navigate their differences, communicate their fears, and build bridges between their worlds of origin. Not without challenges, of course. There were difficult moments, necessary adaptations, painful but essential conversations. Raphael learned to value simplicity, to find beauty in the small joys that Louisa always prioritized. She, in turn, allowed herself to dream bigger, expand her horizons, accept that she deserved abundance without guilt. They moved into a spacious but cozy house in a neighborhood that was halfway between Canary Wharf and Islington, a physical symbol of the balance they sought. Mrs. Celia insisted on keeping her own apartment. "I need my space." "And you need yours," but visited frequently, especially after Raphael built an herb garden specifically for her. One Sunday afternoon, while preparing a barbecue in the backyard, a tradition they had established to gather friends and family, Louisa observed the scene around her. Peter running with other children, Mrs. Celia teaching Denise, her friend from the cafe, how to make a proper caipirinha, Raphael chatting animatedly with Charles, with whom he had surprisingly made peace. "What are you thinking about?" Raphael asked, approaching and wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. Louisa smiled, leaning back against him. "How unpredictable life is. If someone had told me on that rainy night when I picked you up at the hotel that we would be here today, you would have thought it was crazy," he completed, laughing. "Me too. But here we are. We built something real, something of our own." Raphael kissed the top of her head, a gesture of intimacy that had become common between them. "You know what I sometimes think? That maybe I had to lose everything, the company, the status, the certainties, to truly gain what matters." "And what matters?" she asked, turning to face him. "This," he replied simply, gesturing to the backyard full of people laughing, talking, sharing. "Real connections. Genuine love, a place to truly belong, not just seem to belong." Louisa felt her eyes well up. It was exactly that. What they had built together was not just a relationship, a family, or a foundation. It was a space where both could be authentically themselves, where differences were not erased but celebrated and integrated into something new and beautiful. "Mummy!" "Raphael, come see what we built," Peter shouted from the other side of the garden, where the children had assembled a kind of city with building blocks. "Shall we go?" Raphael asked, extending his hand to her. Louisa intertwined her fingers with his, feeling the solidity of that simple gesture. "Let's go." And together they walked towards their son, towards the future they continued to build day after day, choice after choice. A future that belonged neither to his world nor to hers, but to an entirely new space, their world. In the end, perhaps Mrs. Celia was partially right. When two different worlds meet, someone always transforms. But transformation doesn't have to be destruction. It can be growth, expansion, a delicate dance that creates something more beautiful than either world could be alone. And that's what Louisa and Raphael discovered in their improbable journey that began on a rainy night, with a simple gesture of humanity, a borrowed jacket to warm a stranger. Sometimes, the most meaningful encounters begin in the most ordinary moments, and sometimes it is precisely in the differences that we find the deepest connections. Dear listeners, we hope Louisa and Raphael's story has touched your hearts as much as it touched ours in telling it. For more stories like this, which explore unlikely encounters and connections that transcend social differences, we have prepared a special playlist that you will find by clicking on the left side of the screen. If this narrative moved you, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video, so we can continue bringing stories that remind us that, in the end, we all seek the same thing: genuine connections in an increasingly superficial world. What city are you watching from? Leave it in the comments, and share with us what touched you most on Louisa and Raphael's journey. We'll be back soon with more stories that make the heart beat faster.